It had only been a few days since you were first brought to the world of Squid Games, a place where people were willing to risk everything for the chance of a fortune. You were one of the quieter contestants, your voice almost non-existent compared to the loud and forceful personalities around you. But you couldn't help it. Anxiety wrapped itself around your throat, keeping you close to the shadows, far from the more intimidating players. Thanos. His name echoed in your mind as one of the most strange individuals amongst the group. His presence was hard to ignore, like a storm quietly brewing in the distance. You had often found yourself drawn to him, not because of any particular reason, but simply because in his presence, you felt safe. There was something in his calm demeanor that grounded you. To everyone else, he seemed like an odd wall, like a psycho who would do anything it took to win, but to you, he was someone who, though terrifying to others, had shown you nothing but kindness since the first game. He would often approach you, inquiring if you needed anything like water or a moment to rest, or even if you just needed someone to talk to. You had learned to trust him, even in situations surrounding you was far from normal. He wasn't like the others who schemed or plotted. He was calm and measured and somehow comforting. It was as if you could finally breathe in his presence. But not everybody saw it that way. Namgyu, one of the more assertive contestants, had started to eye your interactions with suspicion. He had always been the type to assert his dominance, to make sure everyone knew he was in charge. It seemed that your connection with Thanos had sparked something within him. One evening, while the group was resting, Q approached you with a harsh glare in his eyes. "Wayan?" he began, his voice sharp. "I've been watching you." You flinched, looking up, with surprise in your eyes, looking at the man. "Watching me?" "Don't play coy," he spat, leaning closer to you. "You've been getting awfully close to Thanos. It's too obvious. You think you can manipulate him to protect you, to play the helpless card so that he will look after you. You think he won't notice?" Your heart dropped. The words stung more than you could have anticipated. The weight of his accusation had left you breathless. I'm not," you stuttered, trying to find the words, but he didn't give you a chance. "You think you're so clever, huh?" He took another step, his voice growing louder. "You better stop before it gets out of hand. You might be weak, but Thanos is not someone to be played with, and I'll make sure of it." You swallowed hard, the trembling in your hands betraying your panic. You didn't know what to say. Could he be right? Had you been leaning on him for comfort? Had you been leaning on Thanos for a sense of safety without even realizing it? Was there some part of you that sought to manipulate him? But deep down, you knew the truth. You knew you weren't manipulating anyone. You were simply trying to survive. You didn't know how to survive in this terrifying place without a little bit of comfort. And it was Thanos who had started providing that, never asking for anything in return. Meanwhile, Thanos had been observing from a distance, aware of the tense atmosphere that had begun to build. He noticed the way Nam's growing hostility towards you, and it was only a matter of time before the confrontation happened. The next day after Nam's harsh words left you absolutely reeling, Thanos found you, sitting alone, hunched over in a corner of a building. Your face was hidden in your hands and your shoulders shook with the quiet sobs that you had no way of containing. He approached you carefully. His voice was soft but laced with concern. "Wayan?" he called gently, sitting beside you. What happened? You flinched slightly, but he didn't pull away. He sat there quietly. His presence was overwhelming, but comforting, waiting for you to speak. Nom thinks I'm manipulating you, you murmured, your voice barely above a whisper. He thinks I'm pretending to be weak so that you'll protect me. He says you would notice, and I need to stop. Thanos remained silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally he spoke, his voice a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Oh, is that what he thinks? He asked. His tone was low. That I'd let somebody else make me think a way that they wanted. I choose to protect you. You're not manipulating me, YN. His words hit you like a wave. You looked up at him, finding his gaze to be softer than expected. His cold exterior that he showed to the people, completely absent when it came to you. You never asked me to protect you, he continued, his voice gentler now. But I care about you. I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm here because I want to be, not because you've twisted my arm or played some game. The tone of his voice, the honesty in his words made your heart ache, and you realized with a sense of clarity that Thanos had never seen you as a tool or a means to end something. It was just, he didn't care about your strength or your weakness. He simply liked you for who you were. Thanos, you whispered, words thick with emotion. I didn't mean to. I know, he interrupted, offering a small smile. You finally allowed yourself to breathe, feeling a weight lifted off your chest. You don't have to explain. Just know I'm here for you, Anne. Don't listen to him. You're not weak, and you're certainly not manipulating me. You breathed steadily. You had feared that Thanos might see you as a liability or a pawn in some cruel game, but instead he saw you as a person worth protecting. As the days passed, you and Thanos grew even closer, and your bond was unshakable by the doubts of others. But the games have grown more brutal. As the days went by, each round stripping away another layer of humanity. Trust was dangerous, and allies were often made broken in the same breath. But you and Thanos remained steadfast. While others saw their bonds crumbling under the weight of survival, yours only seemed to grow stronger, an unspoken promise between the two of you to protect one another, no matter what. Nam, however, wasn't quite finished with his suspicion. They only festered. With every passing interaction between you and Thanos, his paranoia deepened. To him, you were a manipulator, a quiet schemer, and Thanos, despite his strength and presence, was falling for it. Nam was determined to expose what he believed was your quote-unquote game, no matter what it costs. The next game was only heightened the tension. The contestants were all led into a large, dimly lit warehouse filled with stacks of wooden beams and precariously balanced platforms. The voices of the masked overseers crackled through the speaker. This round will test your trust. Each pair must navigate the course together. One wrong step, and it's over. The voice spoke. You glanced nervously at Thanos, who stood calmly behind you. His towering frame and confident stance was reassuring, but it made the danger of the game turn in your stomach. Nam smirked a few feet away, his sharp eyes darting between you and Thanos. He was partnered with another contestant, a nervous woman who kept her distance from his aggressive demeanor. As the games began, you and Thanos worked together, moving cautiously across the platforms. The beams wobbled under your weight and your heartbeat thundered in your ears. Thanos, however, remained composed. "Step where I step," he instructed, his deep voice steady and his hair bright. "Don't rush. Trust me." You nodded, clinging to his words like a lifeline. With every careful step, you began to match his rhythm, your fear erasing slightly as you focused on his movements. Behind you, Nao's voice echoed through the warehouse. "See? This is what I mean. Why am I letting Thanos do all the work?" His words sliced through the tense atmosphere. You faltered, your foot slipping slightly on the beam. Thanos reached out, steadying you with a firm hand on your arm. "Don't listen to him," he said, his voice firm. "Focus on me, Wyan. You're doing fine." You nodded, swallowing hard and raising the balance, but Nam wasn't finished. "Thanos, open your eyes. They're using you," he shouted. "They're weak and they know it, and that's why they're sticking so close to you. You're just a shield to them." Thanos stopped mid-step, his broad shoulders tensing, and he turned his head slightly, his purple hair moving as he does. His gaze locked onto Nam with an intensity that silenced the other man for a moment. Thanos said something, his tone cold and deliberate. "If I were you, I'd focus on surviving instead of running your mouth." You wanted to clear, but Nam was sneered, undefeating under the weight of the warning. Surviving, or just carrying dead weight? You bit your lip, the sting of his words cutting deeper than you could have wanted to admit. But before you could respond, Thanos stepped closer to you, his large frame shielding you from Nam's line of sight. "Wyan," he said softly, his voice a stark contrast to the harshness he'd shown Nam. "You're not dead weight. Don't let this freak get in your head." You nodded, drawing strength from his unwavering confidence. Together you guys continued across the course, each step a testament to the trust you had built together. By the time you reached the end, your legs were shaking and your breath came uneven. But you had made it. You look up at Thanos, a small smile breaking through your exhaustion. "Thanks for believing in me," he said quietly. He nodded, his expression softening. "You don't need to thank me, Wyan, you're stronger than you think." Behind you, a loud crash signaled another team's failure. Nam and his partner had miscalculated a step, sending the woman tumbling into the abyss below. Nam barely managed to save himself, clinging onto the edge of the platform before pulling himself up. His fury was palatable as he stormed towards you and Thanos at the finish line. "You think this is over?" he hissed, glaring at you. "I'll prove it. I'll show everyone what you really are." Thanos stepped forward, placing himself between you and Nam. His presence was like a wall, an unmovable and unyielding one. "You'll do nothing," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Wyan doesn't owe you anything, and if they try to hurt them, you'll answer to me." The threat hung in the air, and for a moment Nam hesitated, his bravo faltering under Thanos' piercing gaze. But instead of backing up, he sat on the ground and just stormed off, his spit traveling quickly to the floor. As the remaining contestants were led back to the sleeping quarters, you couldn't shake the weight of Nam's words. Doubt crept into your mind, whispering that maybe, just maybe, he was right. "Wyan?" That night, you heard a voice, as you sat in the corner of the room staring at the flickering light above. Thanos joined you. He began, his tone unnervingly gentle. "Don't let him get to you." You looked up at him, eyes full of uncertainty. "But what if he's right? What if I'm just weak, Thanos? What if I'm holding you back?" He frowned. "He's wrong. You're not weak, you've made it this far. Haven't you? You didn't do it by manipulating anyone. You did it by surviving, by fighting." He reached out, placing a hand on your shoulder. The warmth of his touch was grounding, pulling you back from the spiral of doubt. "Shit, you've been through hell like the rest of us, and you still haven't lost yourself. That's strength, Wyan. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Tears welled up in your eyes, but you blinked them away. "Thank you, Thanos." He gave you a small smile, a rare gesture from someone so stoic. "Yeah, whatever. We're in this together. Don't forget that.